Good morning. Hey, it's my honor to be here in Lithuania again. I was just here in March, and I'm very happy to be back. And one of the reasons I like saying I'm a Texan, and also that I like what's happening here in Lithuania, is we're both on the frontier. There's something that I'd like to make a comparison between a lot of us that didn't spend our entrepreneurial time in Silicon Valley. We compare a lot to Silicon Valley, and I kind of want to do something that you heard a little bit from Lloyd earlier. I'm going to talk about a contrast, that there are some things you can do on the frontier that doesn't happen anymore in Silicon Valley. So let me talk about that for a second. One of the worst things, so I've lived in six different cities here in my career. I was in Boston, Chicago, Guadalajara, Mexico, the Bay Area, Phoenix, Dallas, Austin, and Santiago de Chile. Each one of those places had a different entrepreneurial ecosystem growing and stuff like that. And I could actually talk to you about mechanics, but there's a lot of really great speakers that are talking about the mechanics of running the startup. What I want to talk to you about is the inner game of entrepreneurship, because it's what has to happen no matter what if you really want to create success here in Lithuania. And part of my journey has been about this. One of the negative things that happens in Silicon Valley that you'll see happening is you ask someone, hey, how's it going? How's your startup going? And they'll be like, we're just killing it. We're killing it. We're killing it. We're killing it. But secretly, they're dying inside. And the problem with that is if you think that you have to compete with me, even though you're in social media technology, I'm in water technology, hey, how are you doing? We're just killing it. We're killing it. You know, what it ends up doing is it ends up creating this really bad culture. This really bad culture where people don't really build themselves while they're building their startups. And maybe they create some sort of financial success, but they fail with something else that ends up coming out on TechCrunch, right? Where like we find the dirty little secret about what the entrepreneur has been doing to try to manage what's going on. So I want to talk about the inner game. You know, how do you actually build a company while you're building yourself, and probably building yourself more than anything else? My career has been, I've had the fortune of really getting to focus on that. So early on, I worked for, let's see if this is going to work. Click, click. There we are. I worked for this guy, straight out of college. Steve had gotten fired from Apple. He started a company called Next, and just by luck, I happened to be in the right place, right time, got offered the job. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to totally take that. And this was after he left Apple, and you know, there was a really angry Steve Jobs that I worked for. And some interesting stories I could tell you about, but when we look at entrepreneurs that have had that level of success, or even all the different levels in front, there's something interesting, thank you. There's something interesting that happens, because there really is, the people that go to this level, there's an inner game that they're working on. You know, he had the whole fall from grace, got kicked out of his own empire to just re-enter again. And one of the things that as I look back at this, and I didn't realize it at the time, but it's only after growing up a little bit myself as an entrepreneur that I can kind of see things that we saw signs of back at Next that then made Apple, the big success of Apple, really possible. The thing about it is, so I've gone off and built 7 startups. I've lived in 3 different countries. I launched a company in Mexico. I launched a company in Chile. I also obviously have launched a number of startups in Austin and other parts of the United States. Some of the slides, or some of the logos, or some of the different companies, like Domas mentioned earlier, I've gone off and worked with over 6,000 entrepreneurs, 42 countries. During this trip that I'm in Lithuania, on Friday I go to Nigeria, then I come back and I'm going to be in 5 countries. I'm going to tell you why does that matter to me, and how does it tie into my own journey, so that it might be helpful for you to find in your journeys as you're looking at what is entrepreneurship to you. To give you some idea of the type of things that I have built, the e-commerce engine behind Dell Computer Corporation, the first $2 billion worth of computers sold at Dell.com were sold on software I built in my living room, and then went off and did a bunch of different other things. So, know something about the whole startup process. It's taken me around the world. I think we might still have a click problem, so including living in Chile. And as Lithuania looks to different models around the world about what's happened, sometimes Chile is interesting. I've been talking to some different people inside of your government about what's happened in different parts of the world, about how can we accelerate entrepreneurship. But the most important thing that I've been focused on is global challenges. What are the global challenges? Because of the way my career has gone, and for a variety of different reasons, and I'll tell you a story in just a few slides about this, I decided I want to support the entrepreneurs that are building the businesses that are changing the world for the better. And what I mean by that is, if you solve a human need, there's always a good business in it. And some of the really great things, one of the great businesses that have been missed out there is, it's like you can go have another app that, helps your buddies find each other in a bar and stuff like that. And there's nothing wrong with that, but there's something interesting about solving the water crisis or the healthcare crisis or whatever it might be, something like that. Human need is always in fashion. And what's interesting is we can use startups as a vehicle to deal with those type of issues all around the world. So this is where things launched into my own personal revolution. Now this picture, the picture at the very front, when you saw me with hair, that was when I had launched my first startup in 1994. This picture is this is Father Hidalgo, the guy who lit the Mexican Revolution. And I think it's interesting because to really get to where I'm talking about what you need to do if you really want to create success as an entrepreneur, you have to find your own personal revolution. There's something personal. It's not just about building a business that makes money. It's about building something that has some part of your spirit that gets expressed. Whatever reason you think you were put on the planet, whether it's by God or whatever else, however you think that you got here, there's something to get in contact with about that. Because if you can enable that, even if you're not funded by the right people, even if you don't have the right engineers on your team, even if you don't have all these other issues that a lot of us say, well, this is why I couldn't get my startup to the next level. There's something that if you can get in contact with this, that truly distinguishes the entrepreneurs that are truly successful from the ones that, are just killing it. I'm going to read to you a couple different things because I think that the answer is not in a business book. A lot of times it comes from poets and philosophers. And so part of what I want to read off to you is some of these ideas. The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion. Camus. It's words like this. Hey, I get to work with entrepreneurs around the world, and some of them say, well, wait, we're here, and I really want to be in Silicon Valley, but, we're dealing with this sort of stuff, and there's no investors, and, wah. But then you find out that some guy right next door is able to take advantage of the same thing. This is what I heard in the words of Lloyd earlier when he said, hey, don't try to go do something over there. Figure out how to do it here, and then once you get it strong, then go take over there. That's what these words are. And you don't have to take an existential risk. A lot of times when we think about entrepreneurship, we think, I've got to take an existential risk. These guys, this is Sir Hillary, the guy who went to the top of Mount Everest the first time. That's an existential risk, meaning he could have died through that whole process. And a lot of times, us as entrepreneurs, we actually think that we're up against that, but that's not true. There's now a place in entrepreneurship where you can actually take your passions, take your skills, and find a market. One of the examples I'd like to often give is there are people who are playing games right now that are making more money than the minimum wage in the United States. There are actually whole countries that don't have the same GNP, gross national product, of some of these gaming platforms. When you start thinking about something that simple, then this idea that you could actually do something that you're really passionate about with the existing set of skills that you have, because you don't have to go get an MBA. Go hire one as an entrepreneur. Like I don't have an MBA. I hired one to be in my company. So your existing skills with what you're passionate about, there's a market for it. You have to have the discipline to go after that market. The thing that I've noticed is a lot of us this says salary and this says sanity. So we all start out with a job. For me, I was the stock boy, the guy who brought out the boxes at a store and put stuff on the shelf. That was my first job. That's how I started my whole process of putting beer on the table early in my career. And went off and had a really great career. My career included the time that I worked for Steve Jobs. I got my degree. I actually became an entrepreneur. I was made a bunch of money, built a trading system for Fidelity Investments, built the e-commerce engine behind Dell, built the world's first internet banking app. That was really great, but it really wasn't what I'm talking about this thing in my heart, about what I needed to go do. Now, in my case, and happens to everyone here, there's a moment, some of it happens sometimes earlier in our lives, sometimes later. We wake up, after retiring and say, hey, wait, I missed something. And we go on our mission. In my case, one of my friends committed suicide in 2003, and it destroyed me. I cannot express to you how much rage and how much sadness I had because of what happened. And so I took a perfectly normal technology founder career, and I said, and excuse the language, but this is what I said. I said, fuck it. Didn't make sense to build one more thing. Didn't make sense to build another trading system for Fidelity Investments. Didn't make sense to build another e-commerce engine for Dell. Didn't make sense to build a workflow management system for AT&T. All those things I'd done, but didn't make sense to do that. And that's where I got in contact with my mission. Now, my mission was to go launch this incubator that's now doing all this work around the world. It's going to take me to 5 countries this month, including, America, the US, Europe, and Africa, all in a month. That was my mission that started in 2003 after Danielle's death, to try to figure out what was it that, how is it that a 24-year-old mother of a 1.5-year-old would take her own life? Now, sometimes, like I said, this mission idea happens later in life. What I think is interesting, especially for these parts of the world that are really waking up into entrepreneurship, is to get in contact with this much earlier. To have it be one of the reasons that Austin, Texas, Forbes listed my city, Austin, Texas, as the most entrepreneurial city in the world. One of the reasons I think that we got there, why would Forbes say that? Is because we have a culture where I take care of you and you take care of me. And it's great that you are doing what you are supposed to be doing, and I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. We kind of grew out of the hippie culture of music in the 60s. Like, if you know who Janis Joplin was, if you know who Willie Nelson was, they hung out in Austin, Texas. And as musicians, it's like, you play your thing, I'm going to play my thing, and we're going to help each other. Now, in Silicon Valley, I lived out there twice in my career. Absolutely abhorrent, because, again, you're in social media technology, I'm in water technology, and yeah, how's it going? We're just killing it. We're just killing it. You're not killing it. You're secretly dying inside. The thing about this is that destroys the culture of, in olden times, I'm a farmer, you're a farmer. I help you build your barn, you help me build my barn. I'm not paying you, you're not paying me. But because we do this back and forth, something wonderful happens. We get ahead. How did Austin, Texas, surpass Silicon Valley in such a short period of time? 20 years ago, when I started my first startup there, it was a terrible place to be an entrepreneur. No investors, no engineers to easily find, certainly no marketing people. But we had this amazing culture that we cared about each other. So it's because of that if you create this in your culture, that then you can go off and find your calling. And the calling is where you're making the money you really should be making, doing something really meaningful. And as you do that, as you discover that, and as you support each other in doing that, you become an unstoppable force. And investors know, especially that have gone through this process, investors that made their money through being entrepreneurs versus the financial investors that got an MBA and they went to the VC, these other types of investors, they'll recognize it in you. They'll say, wait, this guy's resilient. This is the whole secret in becoming a resilient entrepreneur, is getting in contact with that. Now, for me, this has actually had me go off and build. This is a slide about TechCrunch, my passion was, I know how to get businesses. I've got 7 different startups that I myself started. I'm the guy to get it off the ground for the first $500,000 to $1 million worth of revenue. And I've done that over and over and over and over again. And I was like, well, wait, how come I can't build a $1 billion company? Well, that's not me. So it made a lot of sense for me to find something where I'm going to actually help you and you and you and you and you get to $1 million worth of revenue, not funding, revenue, as fast as possible. And so what this is an expression of is, this is my hero's journey. This is what I was supposed to do. Each one of you has something different. But the main thing is we have an expression that says, if you can't fix it, feature it. If I couldn't fix where I'm not going to become a billion-dollar entrepreneur, okay, well, I'm going to feature it. I'm going to actually help 1,000 entrepreneurs get there as quickly as possible. The main thinking about this is we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. Most of us get stuck in our history. Most of us get stuck in our story of whatever the story was. Now, in a frontier culture like Lithuania has, or like Texas has, we're always there's a strength in it. We have to make sure, though, that we realize to use the strength to take the next step, but not to get stuck there. How many startups got funded last year? Well, we only got this many, blah, 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 or whatever the story is. In Austin, Texas, it was one of the sad things. People would always be like, we don't have any investors. That doesn't matter. Figure out who your customers are. Build the company up a different way. The main thing is you have to leave behind the thinking that got you there. Don't leave behind the history. I'm a proud fifth-generation Texan. It empowers me to be a certain kind of guy. Same thing about being Lithuanian. The main question is, how do you actually make sure that you use the strengths of that to take the step forward? There's this one key thing. A lot of people want to talk about the economics. We're entrepreneurs. We want to make lots of money. Nothing wrong with that. And then you have engineers that are over here that focus on the technology, the innovations. It's very natural to, I was trained as an engineer. I always like to think about the mousetrap and building the mousetrap. But the real job of the entrepreneur is to be the culture creator, the person who's doing the social line, the orange line right here. And I think this is not taught enough about that. Your job is to build the culture, is to build the social innovation. Even if you're building a new type of trading system, you have to change people. You're building a new kind of culture. What I'm actually pointing to is, as you build your ecosystem here in Vilnius, you also have to, build the culture for that then helps you bootstrap up your businesses to build the culture for yourself. Same thing. You can't separate those. The main thing is, don't fight forces, use them. Buckminster Fuller said this. A lot of times, the thing I'm actually saying back and forth is this idea that we might rail against something that's not working. You can rail against what's not working, or you can figure out, hey, this is how this might work. Find the unique way that it applies to you, and then take that forward. I learned this through Aikido. I've studied a Japanese martial art called Aikido for the last 20 years. And in some ways, this has actually helped me become a better entrepreneur in that in Aikido, smaller guy against a bigger guy, you don't fight the guy. You harmonize with him. You take care of yourself through that process. And then you can go off and actually, I can take care of myself as well as take care of the other person. It's not supposed to be about me beating you or you beating me, right? It's one of us getting a big belt buckle. No, it's more about let's figure out how we can cultivate a collaborative environment. And in a martial art kind of way, it's actually quite interesting to actually think, how do you do that? It's not Ultimate Fighting Championship, which is actually not real in some ways. Right? It's about how do we actually, collaboration is a more powerful force than competition every day of the week. Now, I think when I'm in Europe, Europeans typically get this more than Americans typically do. That it's a more natural thing about there's more concern for the other, but sometimes we forget this as technology entrepreneurs. Part of the secret is the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. So in my case, I've created wealth, destroyed wealth, created wealth again, destroyed wealth again. And one of the things that happened all through this time is there's always something. Like if you really want to push yourself to the next level, if you're truly on your hero's journey of this whole thing about being an entrepreneur, which I invite you to all be on your hero's journey of entrepreneurship, don't just build a business. But you're going to have to face your fears. The last go around, when I was up against something, I've been up against bankruptcy twice in my career. You'd think that I would have figured it out the first time. But the thing that was really powerful was at this one moment, just a few years ago, took a big risk. The risk failed. And I had to decide, am I going to get back up off the ground? Now, part of what we need to do what I'm pointing to, is be able to listen really deeply for what life is presenting to you. There's a moment that I'm talking about, like I said, just a few years ago, about 4 or 5 years ago, that I was like, crap, this idea that I'm building, this network around the world of entrepreneurs, we're right up against running out of money because we expanded too far, too fast, and we had something with, some bad stuff happen. I'll tell you about that over drinks later on tonight if you want to hear it. And it was like, what do I do? Well, thankfully, I ran into this picture that I took. If you've ever heard of a place called Burning Man, I've been there 3 times. It's actually is one of the other ways of getting in touch with kind of an alternative side of the world and what might be possible. I don't know, some of you might have gone. I've talked to a few Lithuanians that went this last year. It's cool to share that. But it's not about Burning Man. It's about listening in those moments when you're up against it. If you really are going to push as an entrepreneur, there's going to be a Thursday night that as you're pushing to get to the next level, you realize, oh crap, how am I going to pay for my employees Friday morning? I don't know of one successful entrepreneur that hasn't been in that type of position where he or she had some moment that they're just gnashing of teeth to try to figure out, how do I get to the next stage? Okay, so what's this picture have anything to do with that? Well, thankfully, as I was up against it just a few years ago, and I'm like, crap, this sucks. I happen to I'm like, clicking around on my computer, just like looking for anything to distract me. Okay, Facebook, that's not enough. Click. And up came this one picture. I'm going to read it to you because it's really important. Because again, I think that the biggest business lessons you don't find in business books, you find in poetry. And this picture that I happened to randomly take at Burning Man just happened to pop up, really weird. And this is what it said to me. Every morning, a new revival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house, empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. Rumi. So imagine having a former business partner steal some money from the bank account and then just sort of disappear and steal an asset. And you're just trying to figure out, I got to write a $30,000 check each month to take care of all my commitments. And everything just like someone actually did something illegal. What the fuck? Excuse my language. What the fuck? It was this that reminded me. I really wanted to get back to being in the field. I didn't want to just be sitting there at my co-working place. I launched Austin's first co-working location. So, there's now 51 in Austin. At the time, there was nothing for serving entrepreneurs. And part of what is up against this, I really wanted to be here with you in Lithuania. And next week, I'm in Nigeria. And the week after that, I'm back in Germany. Then I'm going to be in Norway. I want to be out on the edge where the pioneers are changing the world for the better. And this one thing was like dragging me down, and it created the opportunity for me to say, hey, wait, Rumi, if you're really going to drive a venture, you can learn about lean startup, and that's important. You can find the right investor, and they'll help you in a way. But the most important thing you'll do, at least if you subscribe to what I think about entrepreneurship, is you got to figure out what's going on inside. You got to figure out what's right here. And sometimes the answers come in poetry more than anything else. Oh, looks like something happened. So, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. This is an African proverb, and it says a lot. A lot of times, especially as guys, we're like, hey, I'm going to do it all myself. Because we stand in this myth that Steve Jobs beat metal and plastic into a computer and then brought it to the world himself. Because that's what the story says. You read every frickin' magazine article and it's like one man stood there. Usually one man, right? It's not true. It's not true. Steve Wozniak, Mike Markula, a bunch of other people. You know, Kevin Koym stands before you today, and there's actually, you know, Tanya Horan and Maria and my whole team, and then my group of advisors that have made it possible. A guy by the name of David Altunian picked me up and kicked me back into the game. He said, dude, you're doing something too important. That happens. You have to realize, as much as you might be killing it, you need to reach out to the other. If you want to go far, you want to go fast, you want to bust something out, you can do it yourself. You want to go far, especially if you're creating a culture of startup entrepreneurship in this country, it's really about going far together. The story that I always like to use in talking about the Tech Ranch and talking about this concept is this one. Whoops, let's see. I think so this is the Conestoga wagon. And they don't probably teach American history in Europe. So sorry for being obnoxious. I'm trying to make fun of imperialistic American thoughts. The thing that's interesting about it is if your DNA is still here on the planet, which it is, because you're all here today, your family has gone through a similar story to this. But I'm going to tell you about this. You know, there's this whole story about the 49ers that went west into California to look for gold, and this is what built California. Part of what would happen is your family, and then your family, and your family would actually get one of these wagons and meet at a trailhead, kind of the middle part of the United States. But we didn't know each other. Your family and my family, we didn't know who each other were. But then we would actually take, at this trailhead, we would meet, maybe get to know each other for about a week, and then this whole group would leave. And you and I would take an existential risk with each other, risking our children, risking our families for this opportunity in the future that we couldn't see. There was no TV. We heard a story or two about what's happening out there, but that's it. This whole idea about going fast and going far, this has been part of our cultural heritage, whether you're in Lithuania, Texas, or California. And part of it is, as technology entrepreneurs, we forgot that. So let me just remind you that you don't have to, risk your life with someone else, but there is a reason to really open up so you're not hiding behind, or just killing it. Final slide. My statement to you is find your work and give your life to it. Give yourself to it. The idea about this is it's okay that you build whatever kind of startup you want to build. For me, I had to go prove something. I had to go look at the chip on my shoulder. I built one of the largest websites in the world and blah, blah, blah. And that's important. Every once in a while, testosterone has its place. But on the other side, the thing I'm learning now is I've kind of grown up a little bit as an entrepreneur. It's more important for you, and you will get to financial success faster if you really figure out what is it that you were put on the planet for, and build a business model around that. Each one of you has a passion. And a lot of times we hold that back and say, well, it's just unreasonable that I would actually do that. I can't do something with that. In my case, startup after startup after startup after startup, really wanting to do it across country borders. I didn't really believe that I could do this until someone said, dude, you're doing it. Now go do it farther. Whatever that is for you. I would love, if I have a little bit of time to take a question or two, I'd love to actually find out, what is it you're working on, and how can I actually help you and my team help you to propel it forward. If you have anything for us, this last slide typically has, if you could advance one more slide, please. Looks like my clicker. This usually has my Twitter handle on it. It's @KKOYM. One of the things I love in speaking and stuff like that is there might be just a handful of you that are actually really saying, hey, I'm up against this idea. I'm up against figuring out. I'd love to help you connect on that. We've got a few minutes, I think, to take a question or two. But if nothing else, if you're interested in interacting with me about this concept, hit me on Twitter, @KKoym. Any questions I have? Right here.
So thank you for your presentation, and I wanted to ask, who did you want to be when you were young, and had you any dream of becoming someone?
You know, we all have a story about the strength and the weakness of whatever happened in childhood. For me, my childhood had its own set of crises, so I don't know that I really ever thought about it. And I grew up a poor kid. For U.S. standards, I grew up a poor kid. And I didn't know what the word entrepreneurship was. And I had that job with Next before I'd ever been on an airplane, which is kind of odd because most Americans have, been on airplanes since they were like this, right? To travel around the country. And so I didn't know what a startup was. I didn't know any of that sort of stuff. I liked engineering. I liked tearing, instead of giving me toys as an example, my grandfather gave me motors, and I'd tear them apart, and then eventually I learned how to put them back together. That's really all I know that I look back at about that sort of stuff. It wasn't until much later that I came in contact with a couple different people that said, hey, Wayne, you really do deserve to do something you dream about. And the job that I just accidentally got at Next, the Steve Jobs company, when I started realizing where I was at, I didn't know I worked for Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs wasn't Steve Jobs when I was working for Steve Jobs. And it's been like every year I've kind of realized that. Part of my message about that is a lot of times we don't even realize where we're already at. And so I can't tell you that I actually knew. And I didn't allow myself to dream. Because of the childhood situation I grew up in, I didn't allow myself to dream like that. But I think we all have a dream. Like at some point, like 5 years old, 6 years old, we were doing something that then needs to be relit. Another question? Do I have any more time? No. I tell you what, I'd love to actually interact with you more because I think this is one of the most important parts of entrepreneurship. It's important to study. It's important to do all these other things. But most importantly, it's to get a group of y'all together and help each other. And I'm not talking about your friends that are employees. I'm talking about other entrepreneurs. Your friends that are employees, they don't understand. One of my best friends is a 25-year IBMer. I love him to death, and he doesn't understand. Business people never understand what entrepreneurs have to learn. With that, it's my honor to be here with y'all today. I love what you're doing with your country and building this place. I'm looking forward to coming back very soon because you have it's an interesting time in Lithuania's history, and I'm happy to be here. And I was here 2 months ago. I'll be back soon. Thank you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Kevin. That was great.